First tonight, the coming fight over a data gold mine, the photos and other information stored at the MVA. Joining us to discuss that and more in our political roundtable this week are Delegate Susan McComas, a Republican from Harford County, and Delegate Charles Sydnor, a Democrat from Baltimore County. Thanks to both of you for braving the heat and joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I want to start with data. I know that that's an interest of yours, Charles, and you know, data makes the world go round these days. The MVA knows everything about everybody and has pictures of everybody. What's the concern there?
Well, back in 2016, Georgetown Center on Privacy and Technology, they had put out a publication entitled The Perpetual Lineup that talked about how facial recognition software was being used by local and state law enforcement. The whole concept of a perpetual lineup concerns me and should concern all law-abiding citizens of Maryland, because unlike the photo arrays that law enforcement uses in trying to figure out who criminals are, which is a book of mugshots of folk who have actually committed crimes, when you talk about a perpetual lineup, you're talking about any and everybody who's in a database being used to try to figure out who that person may be that committed a crime.
So specifically, what would you want to see changed about how Maryland deals with its data, whether it's at the MVA or somewhere else?
Well, right now, and I think Maryland's been using this system since 2011 from my research, there was no public input in it, number one. Law enforcement just kind of begun doing it, and we find out by happenstance. I think any of these types of surveillance technologies, the legislature, as that voice of the people, we should have that opportunity to kind of talk about what's going on with the data that's coming into the state, as in terms of how law enforcement and in terms of how law enforcement is using it.
Delegate McComas, from your standpoint.
Well, I had an opportunity to listen to the hearing online of Dana Stein's bill, which they wanted to limit the access to the MVA database if there was a warrant or some type of court order.
Was it specifically for immigration, or was it more broad?
This was if you had to have a warrant, or it might have been ICE. I did, but the point is they have numerous databases, and the state really doesn't control this. What it is that the Department of Public Safety and Corrections is the portal. The state police control what goes in, and then there's the federal system, which the FBI is the only one that can really access. But as far as they kind of control the federal system, which is NICS, there's Inlet, so there's lots of different databases, and so it gets quite complicated. So I listened to Tom Williams, who is the person that testifies for the state police, and they were very, very specific. And what they wanted to do, Delegate Stein modified the bill so it would be a study. Well, it never got out of the committee, but it's a very complicated issue, and you have a lot of you have the state, you have the county, and you have the federal players, and you have different databases, and you have different control of different portals. And the state really just, when I say the state, I mean the state of Maryland through corrections, is the portal for this information. But you have to be law enforcement, and you have to have a legitimate purpose to do that. If I am Sergeant McComas and I want to see if my neighbor's got a criminal record, and I want to not go on to case search, I want to see the real nits and grits, I go on there. And I have no legitimate law enforcement reason. I can be, depending on how it's done, if it's federal, I can be charged with a felony, and if it's state, I can be charged with a crime, and I can lose my ability to be a law.
So you're happy with the way it's set up now?
I don't know if I'm happy, but I think that this is such a complicated issue that I am going to defer to the law enforcement, and I am going to defer to the federal and the state institutions that control these databases. This is not a simple thing, because there's so many.
Are you happy deferring to those agencies?
Absolutely not. Those agencies in the past have shown that that type of deferring shouldn't happen. Again, you look at how they're using it. We're not talking about a criminal offense. You're talking about civil offenses in the case of these immigration violations. Those are our photos from our MVA. We control them. And I believe if the governor didn't want those photos to be used, he could certainly say so.
I think it's not so clear, because I think if you do not go to your immigration hearing that's been set, I'm not sure if that then, an FTA is considered a criminal offense at that point because you didn't show up for the civil hearing, or it's a civil offense. But the issue is that you blew off the hearing, and so you're in this country, you're not supposed to be in this country, and they will actually, if you don't show up, they usually will order deportation. So the thing is that you cannot access this database with, let's say, the Tier 2 visa without a name. You have to have a full name. You can't just go through and say, okay, I want to punch up all of the Tier 2 visas or Tier 2 driver's licenses in the state of Maryland and get your whole stack. It doesn't work that way.
Please.
I was about to say, so in order to find out who these supposed violators are, again, you're using a perpetual database of everyone in the MVA trying to find a face. So I'm in a lineup daily that, and I just think that's unfair.
But are you also in a lineup with, you think of all of the web providers that have maybe your voice, maybe you have an Amazon device or one of these other listening devices that people are sticking in their houses,
right,
or your neighbor's Ring doorbell that's recording you walking by. There's just a flood of this stuff. Not to mention people who we were talking before the show, people who've signed up for the app that ages your photo,
right,
and you've given away your picture forever.
So we have the commercial databases and commercial uses, and we have government uses. I have the ability to try to regulate the kind of government that I want here in the state of Maryland. In our government, we have certain constitutional responsibilities and that are owed to our citizens. The commercial side, it is more complex, and you'll have people who argue that people have consented to that type of use and the like. There's some devices that I won't use because I know that in consenting, I'm giving certain companies access to certain information that if law enforcement did want it, they could get it. So that is probably a bigger pickle dealing with commercial databases than it is the state.
Let's talk immigration for a second, because later in the program we're going to focus in on immigration law from the standpoint of how Maryland and its jurisdictions interface with federal immigration enforcement. And there's some differences there. Do we have it right? I mean, is there anything you'd want to change?
The problem is there is no uniformity. I mean, Harford County and Frederick have the 287G programs.
What's that?
That is where they can connect. They can train people inside the system to work with ICE. And it's a rigorous program, and they have to do everything within the ICE protocols. But they would be in the detention center, and if someone is going to be let go, they notify ICE if there's any detainers or warrants. The problem is that I think if you do not have a controlled border, you don't have a country. So you can't have you can't let everybody in. You should know who you want to let in. You need to know who the people are. And regarding the census, I think it's a legitimate question to ask citizenship, because you need to know how many people aren't citizens. You need to know how many people speak English, don't speak English. You need to know what kind of countries they come from, because right now I get when I get an insurance thing, then they say, okay, it's covered or it's not covered, and I want to appeal it. They have a 2-page or 3-page list of all the different languages that can, to cover their rights to appeal. And I know that years ago, Nancy Grasmick testified before the Republican caucus and said that Montgomery County had to account for, at a minimum, 200 different languages for the kids, as English being the second language for those children.
Right.
200. So to better manage the needs of the communities, it makes sense to know as detailed, what are you dealing with?
After the Supreme Court decision, the question doesn't appear that it's going to be on the census form. But Delegate Sydnor, if you want to talk about that and the broad issue of why Harford County may do it one way and your county may do it another way.
More broadly, and to address the whole citizenship on the census, again, I think Donald Trump and his administration, when introducing that question, just the concept, I mean, the idea that they would introduce that for the purposes of racial discrimination is bothersome to me, and I'm glad that the court came down as it did. With regards to how each of the localities deal with it, I think if Harford County decides that it wants to handle it the way, that's the voters' choices. Thankfully, we have a county executive who decided that we're not going to be doing it that way, and I think we're doing it right in Baltimore County.
One other piece of news I want to touch on before I run out of time is the new Speaker of the House, Delegate Jones, Speaker Jones, has indicated that her first order of business, House Bill 1 in the next session, is going to be providing for an additional $2 billion in funding for school construction. I'm sure that's going to be a popular idea. Are the resources there to do it?
I think it is a very popular idea, and I think Delegate McComas and we both voted for that bill. Last session was $2.2 million. I think we have to we'll find the resources. I think it's an important vote, and I know there's a lot of people back in Baltimore County that were extremely disappointed when the Senate did not move or vote for passage of the bill. I know I have a number of schools in my district, including Bedford Elementary, and we have Lansdowne, which is just one outside of my district, that are looking forward to its delegation supporting that legislation. So I'll be voting for it again.
Delegate McComas?
My concern is it's always where are we going to get the money, and so I think that just saying, okay, we're gonna take this money from somewhere else and put it here, or we're going to raise taxes. Maybe we need to also look outside the box a little bit and see if we can work some public-private partnerships. I know there's a lot of vacancies in buildings, commercial buildings, that might work for different types of educational opportunities for the kids. I know Harford County is looking very seriously at trying to expand apprenticeship programs and opportunities on the Route 40 corridor.
Very good. Delegates McComas and Sydnor, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.